Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking today at podcast 3, my latest adventure as a bee-loving imaginer, and I'm going to be in a dialogue with my new spiritual leader, mentor, friend, comrade, colleague, Rainer Maria Rilke. He is by all odds, the greatest German writing poet of the 20th century. And in this book that I just showed you, he has written two books he published separately, but I'm combining them. They clearly belong together. They are called New Poems, Parts 1 and 2. And in this collection, he, just like me, is a beloved imaginer who wants to become one with the scripture that he sings. And he enters into many religious, mythic, imaginal, scriptural traditions, including Buddhism, Islam, and the worlds of the Greeks and Romans. Okay, let's begin. I'm going to start with the last poem in the book, because it is so very remarkable that this should be the last poem. It shows just how determined Rilke is and how successful in entering into different life worlds. My actual theme for my entire presentation today is, let the things be and sing their being. That could be interpreted two ways. Let the things be and let them sing their being. Or let the things be and sing their being. They're really amounts to the same thing. They're going to sing their being through you. Generally speaking, they don't have the words, and you are going to supply them, but you must do it from a perspective of entire empathy, the let it be perspective. Let's begin with this. This is actually the last poem in the book. It is poem number 178, and it is called Buddha in Glory. What a way to end. He wants to end in glory, and it is the glory of his spiritual mentor, one of many. Center of all centers, kernel's core, almond, self-enclosed and sweetening. All of this to all the stars and more, fruit flesh, yours. Be greeted, King. See, you feel how nothing hangs on you. In the never-ending is your shell. There the juice of strength will stand, impel from outside a radiance aiding too. Only high above your every sun, full is turned white-hot command, yet in you is only but begun. What must over sunlight stand? Well, that's a triumphant conclusion and a remarkable entry into a different spirit. Rilke is very good at this and very determined and very systematic. He has not one, not two, but 3 Buddha poems in this book. In fact, a Jesuit priest and professor of theology named Karl Josef Kuscher in Germany has written a book. It's a little book, but perfectly crafted, about the 3 Buddha poems of Rilke in this collection that we're using today. Now, what am I going to do in my comradely, in my friendly, collegial reply? I look at the Buddha from a somewhat different perspective, not perhaps quite so exalted, but deeply stirring to me. What strikes me in all the depictions that I see of him is the smile. Rilke doesn't mention that, but it's remarkable. First, for being a smile, you don't see too many spiritual figures depicted as with a smile. I remember my teacher in 6th grade saying how profoundly moved she was by the 2-line, the shortest verse in the Christian scripture, Jesus wept. Well, an equally strong effect on me would be produced by a scripture verse, if there were one, that would say, Jesus smiled. And what is so very special about his smile is that it has the maternal look. To me, it seems very maternal, very tender and soft and gentle and somewhat enigmatic of Leonardo's Mona Lisa. So, here we go. It is told that but a single thought Buddha held, 10,000 devils could swift dispel. No cunning, nothing caught, simply something understood. Deeplier than demon or than God, breathing under, over, and beside. Molten starry center of the sod, seeing, feeling, tranquil-eyed. Far more free than we from other will. You to me embody mother calm, in the time the mind is lying still, and the mulling winds embalm. Let's turn now to Rilke's writing of one of the finest Islam-based poems in the world. It's a sonnet called Muhammad's Calling. I should explain that though this episode is outlined and told very briefly and a bit opaquely in the Quran, it is richly ornamented with detail in the memoir narrative or hadith tradition. And as we read it, in, for example, the Sahih al-Bukhari hadith, it turns out that Muhammad is in a cave on top of a mountain, perhaps meditating, and there at the entrance of the cave enters Angel Gabriel and no one else, except it isn't clear who he is to Muhammad, and it becomes even less clear when Gabriel tells him to read. It's important in Islamic tradition, and it's stated forthright and clearly in the Quran, that Muhammad was illiterate. And he thought this was a really ridiculous and possibly very dangerous, impish joke of some evil sprite, perhaps, a terrible trick that was being played on him, and he resisted. But Angel Gabriel grabbed hold of him, much as the angel wrestles with Jacob in the Jewish Bible. So here, Muhammad wrestles with the angel. He gets knocked to the ground. He rises up and he runs to the entrance of the cave, hoping perhaps to jump off and commit suicide, so he's no more to be endangered by an evil spirit. But then what does he see? He looks at the horizon, and there is the angel Gabriel, a figure getting larger and larger until he covers the sky entire, at which point he goes back into the cave, convinced that this is something a lot more fundamental than he had feared, and as fundamental as he might well hope. And he allows himself to be commanded to read, even though he has no idea how, and he starts to read. And that is how the Quran began to come to us. Now, the Sufis look very closely at the Quran, and there is no mention anywhere, or in fact, as far as I can see, in any tradition of any specific character of text. Nothing about reading from something written in marble or stone or papyrus maybe, or parchment or clay or wood. So the Sufis say what Muhammad did was he read in his heart the meaning of the universe. Okay, now that's exactly the experience that Rilke focuses on in this sonnet. Sonnet, we remember from the Shakespeare. Shakespeare is a quick, concise 14-liner. Into his hiding place upon the height, what we know well had swiftly happened. The angel, came, tall, pure, in blazing light. All protest waved aside, he pressingly asked, tired, bewildered merchant, that is all he was, of travel weary, a delay. He'd never read before, and now to say such words, a wise man might the task appall. The angel, though, commanded, showed, indeed again showed what upon that page was writ, would not give up, but urged, insisted, read. And so he read, so that the angel bowed, and was now one who had recited it, was able, heard, had done it, was allowed. I can't top that. but I can look at Muhammad from another angle. I begin with a quote from Wordsworth, who in his verse autobiography said, "Fair seed time had my soul, and I grew up, fostered alike by beauty and by fear." We've had the fear episode. Now we have something more just beautiful and reassuring and calming. Fostered alike by beauty and by fear, Muhammad's kept again within a cave, yet now with no temptation of the grave, rather a charmed and an idyllic cheer. Enemies gathered, and they came quite near, but found him not. A spider spread a vast web at the entry, an acacia cast her patterned shadows, and a rock dove clear signal of non-intrusion gave. The place a man would have to set his foot to pass into the cave she rested on. With grass and twigs and eggs she halted hunter's pace. Like the night flight, the tour of planet spheres, this grace-rich tale the favored man endears. So I think we're doing rather well with empathetic entry into traditions, non-judgmental except empathetic, letting it be and sing its being. Now, in the third item that we have, I go to the ancient Greeks. This poem is called Cretan Artemis. That is, she lives on the island of Crete. Artemis is a virgin goddess of archery and of midwifery. She helps mothers give birth. Wind of headlands, foothills, wasn't her forehead like an object swathed in light? Smooth opposing, light beast, wind astir, did you form her? Garment bright, shaping for the breasts, the unaware, like a changeable presentiment? Meanwhile she, with wise, all-knowing air, girded for the distant, coolness lent, stormed with hordes of nymphs, each near each a hound, testing out the bows they'd firmly bound, straps high fastened, tight of girth, sometimes from their settlements afar, summoned, wrathful where the perils are, by the cries attending birth. It's good to know in advance that she is the goddess who helps mothers give birth, or you might have a little trouble with that last one. It's interesting, isn't it? On the one hand, such a loving thing as being always there to help a mother who may be in near despair. It says cries that are wrathful. And at the other extreme, she's there with her hordes of fellow archers or archeresses. There's combativeness, there's war, as well as empathy and love. That's a kind of twinning, a combining, an intertwining that Rilke will explore. It goes deep, it lies deep in Greek mythology and perhaps in our psychology too. Now in my reply, I have a more cheerful personality. I focus on the thing about her that I love the most, and that is her childbirth assistance. She began that most remarkably the minute after she was born. Here's what happened. She was born, and then out of the womb was coming her brother, god Apollo, and she helped the mother get Apollo smoothly out of the womb. So there she is, a midwife, just a moment after she was born. An amazing story. Now, I wrote this up not quite in the Rilke verse form. Instead, I used a different ancient verse form to get me into the spirit of the Greeks. I used a Greek verse form. It's the Alcaic, and the meter is like this. And 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and 5, and 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and 5. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and a 2 and a 3 and 4 and The Isle of Delos rose at a god command, a palm tree planted deep in her sacred lake, in order that the Holy Mother, Leto, could lean on the trunk while birthing Apollo, Artemis, the lacustrine twins. The goddess child came first. With a kindly hand, she helped assure her blue-eyed, blonde-haired brother's delivery to be less painful. Now, in the rest of this poem, I talk about different things that are on this island, because many cultures have lived there, and many myths and imaginal experiences are embodied in their still visible legacies. I had a wonderful time touring this island. It was the high point of my trip to the Greek islands. The island theme was purification. Here, you'd neither be allowed to be born nor die, but chapel, temple, fane abundant, fane is a shrine, Isis, Apollo, and Dionysus were multitude. The Artemis altar's might did not diminish that of the phalloi bold atop their poles, the long-necked rooster, Maenad, Silenus, the nymphs and Hermes that filled the Dionysian shrine. When Greeks envisioned with Egyptians a blended god, the new Serapis had resplendent powers of Hapi and dark bright Wesir. In later centuries, when the Grecian boats approached, the grieving breezes appeared to cry, the gods are gone forever," sinking the heart and the hope of sailors. Yes, well, we're in Greek mythology now, and so I am going to proceed to one of the most beautiful of myths in the Greek tradition, the birth of Aphrodite, or in Roman naming, Venus. You've perhaps seen her in the Botticelli painting on the half shell. This is a little different. This morning after, frightful, what a night that came and passed, with shouting, trouble, uproar. The sea entire broke open with a cry, and as the cry closed in upon itself, from paling day, the heavens open moment, down falling in the muted fish abyss, the sea gave birth. Nothing could be calmer than the Botticelli painting. But there's nothing calm in the Greek mythology. Why the cry? Why does the ocean break open with a cry? Well, it happens, you see, that what just fell down into the ocean was the sexual organs of Sky, Uranos, who'd just been castrated and detesticulated by his son, Kronos, whom he had tried to devour alive. There's a lot of things they don't tell you when you're a kid about Greek mythology. It has to be cleaned up a little bit to make it tolerable for retelling in the schools. But that's what happened. Venus is born of an act of sexual violence, and well, that's the theme I've been talking about, the propinquity of love to war. From early sun forth shimmering, the hair foam of wider shame of waves, and on the shore the maiden white stood up, bewildered, wet. As youthful, green, a leaf will touch itself, and stretching, open out what was rolled up. The body in the cool was slow unfolded, both inwardly and toward the untouched dawn wind. Like moons in clarity, the knees uprising sank back in cloudy borders of the thighs. The narrow shadow of the calves withdrew. The feet were lighter when they slightly tensed. The joints lived even as the eager throats of drinkers. In Harbor Hollow, chalice, lay the body, as newfound fruit enclasped in childish hand. Within the narrow goblet of the navel was all the darkness of that gleaming life. Above would hover light, the little wavelets, and steady overflow it toward the loins, where now and then a quiet streaming was. Light pierced, however, still without a shadow, mindful of Birchen Grove in early April, warm empty and unhidden, the pudenda. Now stood the lively balance of the shoulders, in equilibrium on upright body, that from the water like a springtime fountain rose, wavered, falling then on slender arms, more speedy yet the rushing fall of hair. Next, very slowly passing by, the face, from interrupted darkness of her bending, into a clear, symmetric, lifted being. Below, held somewhat back, the upright chin. Now, with the neck extended as a ray, and as a flower stem with sap arising, the arms would also be in pleasure spread, like swans when they are looking for the shoreline. Then came into this body's darkened dawn time what seemed the breathing first of morning wind. In tender networks of arterial branches, a whispering occurred. The blood began to rush across the depth of newer places, and now it grew, this wind. It threw itself with fullest breath into the new-grown breasts and filled them, and impelled itself in them, so that like sails which were with distance filled, they urged the lightsome maiden to the strand. Thus land she reached, the goddess. And behind her, who now across the shoreline, young was running, to the unfolding noon were opened up, the flowers and grasses warm, bewildered, as if they'd been embraced. She went, she ran. At noon, however, in the heaviest hour, climbed up sea again on high, and threw a dolphin on the place where she had been, dead, red, and open. Well, so after one of the most beautiful experiences in world poetry, we end with that violence. And in fact, in Venus's career, there is an alliance with war. She was actually married to Vulcan, the artisan god, a craftsman, a blacksmith. And beauty and art, you might think, belong well together, but evidently she wasn't satisfied. She spent far too much of her time with the war god Mars. Eventually, love and war, beauty and Mars had a child. And who was that? It was Cupid. Lovable little boy, but with those darts. Well, now we've got also the dolphin. The dolphin has been wounded. Well, in love we're vulnerable, right? Vulnerable comes from Latin vulnus, vulneris, meaning a wound. It means woundable. The dolphin is important, and I'm going to begin with it in my reply, because it was the dolphin that led the settler sailors to what would be the site of the future oracle of Greek religion, and that is called Delphi. You've perhaps guessed already. It comes from Latin or Greek Delphos, or dolphin. You can see that we still are speaking Greek when we say dolphin. The dolphin is so lovable. The dolphin is so human-like because it's so smart. And so the sailors trusted it to lead them to the site of the oracle. I reply once again, not in Rilke's meter, but in another ancient meter, hendecasyllabics. And 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and a 4 and 5 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 8, 9, 10, 11. Hendecasyllabics means 11. Sun god oracle, here behold your dolphin. First a crew to the holy place conducting, where they priestly would be, Apollo's honor. All at once he was altered. In amazement, sailors followed, the dolphin wisely guided. Picked a nebulous rift where later Sibyl, Pythia, in the older time her title, vapors breathing would emanate in lessons, veiled revealing enigmas to unriddle. Mists Delphinian, oracle at Delphi. The Delphic oracles were women of wisdom. They were not young, but they were required to be married and to have had children. They had to know something about the secrets of that life of which they'd be speaking. Part 1. Dead and bloody the Delphos thrown by ocean. Let's recall that Uranos, god of heaven, was deprived by his son of privy member. Knife revenged by the wrathful rebel Kronos, fell the genital, fertilized the water. Then arose Aphrodite, Roman Venus, progeny of a passion truly brutal, loose and dallying she in later mythos, love and bloody, entwined from wild beginnings. Theme we needn't develop any further. Part 2. Next we turn to the sad prophetic apple, on the surface of which was beauty written. Eris, Discord, had thrown the fruit in anger when she wasn't invited to the wedding. Thetis, Peleus held, Achilles' parents. Who most beautiful will deserve the fruit prize? Aphrodite? Athena? Maybe Hera? Paris, prudent, was told to judge the contest. Hera offered the kingship of the world realm. Wise Athena, her prudent skill in battle. Last, the love of the lady all considered. First in beauty among existing women, Aphrodite would offer Paris. Tempted, her he chose, and he won the Trojan Helen. Blood and burning would end our second legend. You remember the Trojan War, don't you? And the burning of Troy. Now we get to part 3, our conclusion. Venus, changed to the later Latin naming, was the mother of pious grave Aeneas. Him had Jupiter chosen as the founder after years of the warlike Roman nation. Venus, though, of the love motif was mindful. She's the rival of Hera, or Juno, Jupiter's wife, because well, they're basically both attracted to Jupiter. She would guide the reluctant boat to Carthage, where Queen Dido, enamored of Aeneas, rescued him from a storm the foam-born started. Venus started a storm and led the craft of Aeneas astray onto the shores of Carthage. Dido rescued the nearly shipwrecked sailor, took him then to a cave for evening banquet. Angry Jupiter couldn't grant approval. What a frivolous, trivial intermission. Scolding, lashing the man to pious duty, he commanded, "Depart and leave the lady." So he did. On her flaming pyre she perished. She was attracted to Aeneas. She threw herself on the funeral fire and killed herself. Thus we've ended our 3 Delphinian lessons. Roma, nothing but amor written backward. Roma is the Latin word for Rome, and amor is R-O-M-A spelled backwards, A-M-O-R. Amor, that's love, that's amore. You perhaps remember the Italian song, or song with an Italian word in it. Mars our Venus would lead away from Vulcan. So the fatal is lover of the fertile. They are entwined, though we mainly fail to see it. There are very few collocutors quite so fertile in engendering replies as Rilke. Just a moment. Just a second. Next we have The Vase of Roses. This is also, I think it ranks with the Venus poem as one of the finest things Rilke wrote in this collection. You saw them, angry, flare. 2 youths you saw, tight clasped into a ball, and who knows why? It was but hate, and rolled about the ground One animal, new felled by stinging bees, mere actors, strutting high, exaggerators, like steeds enraged, collapsing, breaking down, with rolling eyes and baring of the teeth, as if the skull were splitting from the lips. But now you know how this forgot itself. Didn't I just say that? We tend to forget the kinship of love and wounding or woundedness, love and war, love and violence. And this fight of men on the ground has absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to hear about roses. On the surface, it has nothing to do, but I hope that my presentation has shown you that in the depth, there's a very great deal to do. Anyway, I hope I've helped you understand why that first paragraph is there. It is not obvious at all. But now you know how this forgot itself. Before you stands the vase with roses filled, made unforgettable because replete with uttermost of being and inclining. Restraint, surrender never, standing fast, that would be ours, an uttermost for us. A soundless life, a going up unending, room needing, yet not taking room from that room which diminishes the things around, almost not outlined, something set apart and purely inner, strange in tenderness, exhaling radiance to the very edge. Do we know anything resembling this? And then like this, that feeling should arise when flower petals touch. And this, that one will open like a lid, and underneath lie other eyelids, waiting and closed, as if they, in a tenfold sleep, had needed to tamp down the power of vision. And then, this most of all, that through these petals the light must penetrate. From myriad heavens, they're slowly filtering that drop of darkness, in whose gleamed fire the yet bewildered bundle of pollen vessels agitated towers. As for the movement in the roses, look, gestures from such a little nook unfolding, they'd be invisible, did not their rays not run all helter-skelter into world all. Look at the white one that has happy blossomed and stands there in the large and open leaves, recalling Venus upright on the seashell. And this one, reddening, as if confused, that tries to bend across to one who's cooler. The cooler one unfeelingly withdraws, and like the cold one stands in self-enwrapped among the open ones that all are shedding. And what they shed, a light and heavy thing, as if it mantle, burden, wing, and mask might be, that vary as the flowers themselves, and how they shed, as if before a loved one. There's naught they cannot be, this yellow one, that open, hollow lies. Was it not skin of fallen fruit? The yellow hue the same, and too the gathered juice of orange red. And was the rising just too much for this one, since in the air the pink without a name took on the bitter aftertaste of lilac? Could this one of batiste portray a dress in which yet tender, breath warm, hides the blouse, the both of them together thrown aside, in morning shadow of old woodland bath? And this one here, the opal porcelain, as fragile as a shallow china cup, and filled with tiny, brightly colored moths, and that one holding nothing but itself. Aren't they all themselves alone containing? If self-containment means the world without, the wind and rain and patience of the spring, and guilt and trouble and enfolded fate, and darkness of the evening on the earth. Up to the wander clouds, they're coming, going, to the vague distant influence of stars, to change into a hand with inness filled. Now lies it carefree in the open roses. I have to reply to that, come at it from a different angle, a different tradition. I look at it from a Persian medieval Sufi standpoint. That's a mystical kind of thinking based in Islam. In Sufi poetry, two things we find endlessly recurrent: the rose and the nightingale. The nightingale sings, the rose effuses fragrance. The nightingale is the seeking soul, and the rose, its presentation, its imagining of God. And I have written this in the something like the Omar Khayyam stanza. Perhaps you know the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. I love it, and I have used it here, except I use 4-beat lines rather than 5, so that the harmonies will be more intense, inasmuch as they will come sooner. Who'll change the fire to rose and tree, can charm the world from harm to free. The soul, than cypress deeper green, by fragrance rendered melody. The petals bold, supremely seen, are both the castle and the queen, and testify as well to all that centuries of tending mean. The nightingale aroma call will bid approach the palace hall, that he a love may wild outpour, distilled in tones that mildly fall. The secret in her breathing more will rouse in fountaining to soar the sound of Sufi bird of eld than ever told the olden lore. From love undampened, never quelled, the depth of aural breath can meld with Rhoda's own auroral scent, as gold and gem the craftsman weld. The Alif in creation meant that heaven's strength would not relent in artery and heart of fire, where blood of welling went. Euglena and amoeba higher would chant in towering desire, till Sheba and her nightingale in Eden bower might respire. If thorn be warden, winter pale, affray a while in icy mail, the cypress needn't sigh, for we shall feel the May that cannot fail. Oh, I almost forgot what we have next. Something that may, let me find it. Bookmark fell out, I think. This is going to carry Greek mythology into the underworld. Just a second. Here we go. We're still with Greek mythology, but now we turn to Orpheus. Orpheus and Eurydice. Once again, it's a woman. He's in love with her. He wants to bring her back to life. She has died, and he can do it, if only he doesn't look backward. Are you familiar with this? Lot's wife, she wasn't supposed to look back when she was allowed to escape from the burning of the city of Sodom. I'm not sure that Rilke much likes these commandments not to look back. He lets being be. He lets it sing its being. He doesn't forbid himself to look here or there. So let's read and see what we learn from Rilke about Orpheus and Eurydice, and Hermes is with them. He is the god of passage, of transition. He'll take your soul to the next world, because he knows where the worlds are. And he is winged. He has winged feet, winged shoes rather, winged cap. 'Twas rocky wonder structure for the souls. Like silent silver ore they wandered forth, as arteries through dark. Between the roots the blood rushed up, as humans moving on, and heavy in the dark as porphyry, the only red. That's the redness of blood, is it not? And craggy rocks were there, and insubstantial woods, void vaulting bridges, that grey and widening and blinded pond that overhung its fundament afar, as rainy heaven over landscape hangs. Between the meadows, gentle in forbearance, appeared the paling strip, the only pathway, as one long pallid surfacing laid down. Along that single pathway did they come. The first, the slender man, blue mantle clad. This is Orpheus, the god of singing, who looked ahead in muteness, though impatient. His tread consumed the way, unchewed in big and hefty bites, the while his hands hung down, closed heavily from out the folds of clothing, and knew no longer of the lightsome lyre, which with the left hand intertwined had grown, as tendrilled rose vine with the bough of olive. There are the roses returning to us. His senses felt as if they had been split. The gaze would hound-like run, anticipating, then turn around, come back, then farther, farther, stay waiting at the bending of the road. His hearing, though, held back like an aroma. At times it seemed to him as if it reached as far as where the other two were walking, who had to follow this entire ascent. Then it was echo, merely, of his treading, and wind that blew his cloak, which were behind him. He said, though to himself, "They're coming, still." Out loud he said it, heard the echo dying. They came indeed, just two they were, who went with fearful gentleness, and might he but turn around, if looking back were not the undermining of the whole endeavor that sought accomplishment, he would behold the two so gentle following him, silent. The god of going, he, the message herald, the travel hood above the shining eyes, thin staff before the body stretching outward, and beating pinions at the ankle joints. Mercury, Hermes. And to the hand, the left surrendered. She, the so much loved, for whom more dole, more grief, resounded from lyre than heard from any wailing woman. It was a world of dirge created where was all retained, the forest and the vale, and path and village, river, mead, and beast, so that around this morning world, as round the other earth, a sun was circulating, a constellated heaven, quiet went, a morning heaven, every star displaced. She so much loved. It's not clear whether all of that is actually there or just simply can't help but be imagined when you look at her. She walked on, guided by a godly hand, her gait held in by ceremonial ribbons, unsure, a gentle tread without impatience, within herself, as one with hope of higher, who thought not of the man who strode before her. She, self-contained, because her having died had filled her as with fullness. Like to a fruit with sweetness dark replete, so was she full with greatness of her death, that was so new that she could nothing grasp. For she was in a new virginity, not touchable, her maidenhead enclosed as of a youthful blossom toward the evening. Her hands to marriage dishabituated, so that the guiding touch, unending tender, even of him the gentlest god, the herald, made her feel ill, too intimate, too near. No longer could she be that lady blonde, who echoed in the poet's song at times, no more the air and isle of ample bed, and the possession of her man no more. She had been loosened as the lengthened hair, surrendered as the lightly falling rain, divided as 100-fold supply. She now was root. And so when suddenly the god restrained her and with painful outcry pronounced the words, "Look, he has turned around." She grasped it not and quietly said, "Who?" Afar and dark before the brightened exit, a certain someone stood, the countenance one could not recognize. He stood and saw how on the little strip of meadow path The eyes with mourning filled, the god, the herald, turned silent round her form to follow after, who had returned the self-same way she came, her gait hemmed in by ceremonial ribbons, unsure, a gentle tread, without impatience. I get the strong feeling, don't you, that it would have been bad to lead her out from where she was. She was transforming into her surroundings. She was letting it be. She was letting the underworld be. And when we contemplate it, we should let that life be. So don't look backward. It's better, I think, to say, don't take orders. And now I'm going to read my reply, which is not mine so much as one I selected. I chose a poem by a woman, Anna Akhmatova, one of the greatest Russian poets of the 20th century. And she wrote about, did you guess it? Lot's wife. And the epigraph, the quote from the Bible is, but Lot's wife looked back behind her and became a pillar of salt. He followed God's envoy, big, mighty, and shining. The righteous man led her along the black hill. His anguish was heard in loud words unrepining. It isn't too late. Take another look still. Behold the red towers of Sodom, your city, the square and the court where you chanted and spun, the windows how empty, the house tall and pretty, where children you bore for a much loving one. She gazed, and infettered with hurt that would kill her. The pain-wasted eyes could no more gaze around. Her body, now salt, was transparent, a pillar. The quick-moving feet rooted fast to the ground. And who will bemoan her? And who will regret her? Great loss with the vanishing glance that she took. I know that my heart cannot ever forget her, surrendering life to a lingering look. I couldn't keep but comment on that. I can't just let Akhmatova have the last word, beautiful and important and crucial and central as it may be. So here's my comment. It may at first appear the husband was a murderer for cruel words that told his wife, look back. What if they left her cold? At first they didn't. Then they did, because she died of having lived. We all enjoy the minute. We would save it, and we can't. Our lives are saline, fatal. Hamlet's rant, Lear's or a newborn's, prove me Chronos' toy. Salt is our obelisk, dried ocean tears. We're water. Molten moment flows away. Love it, urged Heraclitus, but they say a weeper, too, was he. Foregoing fears, the wife, beholder poet, heroine. She liked, she looked, she thanked, she drank it in.